Welcome to Create More Intimacy, a podcast for men. I'm Elisa Stoddard, and I help successful men stop chasing sex and start building real connection so they finally feel close, connected, and wanted again. This is episode 48, Why You're Pulling Away in Your Marriage and Don't Even Realize It. You might think you've just pulled back, that you're tired of trying. But what I see most often isn't disconnection, it's resentment that's been building for a long time. You have worked your butt off, provided, shown up, done what you thought mattered, and somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling appreciated. And once that resentment turns into cynicism, now you're not just frustrated, you're spiraling. And instead of saying what you want, you start avoiding her reaction. I want you to really hear that. You're avoiding her reaction. Most men I work with don't think of that as resentment. They think, well, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. I shouldn't have to keep asking. What's the point if nothing changes anyway? So they stop. And it feels like distance. But it didn't start there. It doesn't start out as resentment. It starts out as effort. You're both trying to do the right things. You're working, providing, showing up, handling what needs to get handled. And in your mind, that should matter. That's how you've learned to show you care. You think, this is what a good husband does. But over time, something starts to feel off. Because the things you're doing aren't landing the way you expected anymore. You're not feeling appreciated for all that you're doing. You're not feeling chosen, and you're definitely not feeling wanted. And when it comes to sex, well, that one hits harder than most men are willing to admit. Because it's not just about sex. It's about what it represents. It's connection. It's desire. It's feeling like she actually wants you, not just tolerates you. So when that's missing or inconsistent, or feels like she is just going along with it, it doesn't just feel disappointing. It feels personal. And at some point, you do try to say something. Maybe you bring it up a few times. Maybe you try to explain how you're feeling or what you want, and it doesn't go the way you hoped. It turns into a fight, or she gets defensive, or one of you shuts down, or maybe she just gives in, but that doesn't feel real, which somehow makes it feel worse. And now you're in a really tough spot because what you want still matters, but the cost of asking for it feels so high. So you start letting things go, or at least you tell yourself you are, but you don't really let it go. You actually silently keep track. Every time you feel dismissed, every time it feels one-sided, every time you think, why am I the only one trying? It builds quietly but steadily. And over time, that starts to shift how you see her and how you see the relationship. You find yourself thinking, she doesn't even see what I do. What is the point anymore? And that's when frustration turns into something heavier. That's when it becomes resentment. At some point, this doesn't just stay inside. It starts to change how you live your life. And for a lot of men, this is where work begins to take up a lot more space. Sometimes it lines up with real demands. Yeah, your career is growing and there's a lot more responsibility now, more pressure, and maybe kids are in a busy stage and life just feels full. But there's usually something else happening underneath that doesn't get named. Work starts to feel cleaner, more predictable, and you know what's expected of you. There, you can perform, you can succeed, and you can feel some sense of progress there that you're not feeling at home. And without really deciding to, you begin to lean into that. You stay a little later. You take on more. You keep your mind occupied because when you're at work, you're not dealing with that feeling of being unwanted or unappreciated or like you're getting it wrong no matter what you do. And at the same time, life at home is asking more of her, too. Her attention is going to the kids, to the house, to everything that needs her. And from your side, it can start to feel like you're further down the list. So now there's pressure on both sides, but it doesn't even feel shared. It feels like you're carrying a lot and still not getting back what you actually want. And this is where the shift really happens. You don't just feel resentful. You start reorganizing your life around not having to feel it as much. You put more energy into what works, and you pull back from what doesn't. And part of that is this quiet decision to stop putting yourself in positions where you're likely to feel shut down or disappointed again. So instead of saying what you want, you keep it to yourself. Instead of risking the conversation, you just let it pass. It isn't because it doesn't matter to you. It's because you don't want to deal with how the conversation might go. And over time, that changes the tone of the relationship. There's less of you in it, less risk, less honesty, less of that willingness to be open when something actually matters. You're still showing up in all the ways that look responsible, for sure, but not in the ways that create connection. And that's how the distance really sets in. Now, this doesn't happen all at once. It is through a series of small shifts that start to feel just like normal life, everyday life. And this is where it starts to feed on itself, because the more you lean into work, the more you produce, the more you carry, there's a part of you that expects it to finally land differently with her. You think, now she'll see it. Now this will matter. Now I will feel appreciated. But at the same time, her life is full too. She's busy. Her attention is divided. And from her side, it may not register the way you expect it to. So instead of feeling more connected, you feel even more overlooked. And that's where the resentment deepens. Now you're working more, but feeling less seen. You're doing more, but feeling less valued. And because of everything we just talked about, you're not bringing that up to her in a clean, direct way. So it stays inside and it turns into assumptions and all sorts of stories you tell yourself. And it turns into that running narrative of, well, it doesn't matter anyway. And here's the part that really, really matters. From your side, it can feel like you're doing everything you can to hold things together. But from her side, what she often experiences is the distance. There's fewer conversations, there's less openness, less emotional presence. So while you're thinking, I'm doing more than ever, she's experiencing, he's not really here with me. He's not in it with me. He doesn't see what's going on. And now you're both reacting to something the other person doesn't fully understand. You feel unappreciated. She feels disconnected. You lean further into what you know how to do. She either leans into what is in front of her or pulls back in her own way. And the gap between you gets wider. And this is the spiral. And not because either of you is trying to create it, but because neither of you is interrupting it. And the way you've been coping with it, working more, saying less, avoiding the reaction, it doesn't solve the problem. It actually reinforces it. And if nothing changes here, this doesn't just level out. It settles into distance, into routine, into a relationship that looks fine from the outside, but it doesn't feel the way you want it to on the inside. If you are in this pattern, the instinct is to focus on her, usually. You want her to notice more, to respond differently, to show more appreciation, to want you, to choose you, to meet you in a way that feels better. And that all makes sense. Of course you want that. But as long as the focus stays there, nothing really shifts. Because the pattern you're in isn't just about what she's doing or not doing. It's about how you've adapted to it. You've adapted by working more, by saying less, by managing yourself, by avoiding the reaction you don't want to deal with. And I want to be really clear here. That adaptation is understandable. It's what most men do when they feel stuck and don't see another way through. That comes at a cost. Because the more you adapt like that, the less honest you become about what you actually want and what's actually bothering you. And without that honesty, there's no real opportunity for the relationship to change. Not because she wouldn't respond differently if she knew, but because you are no longer bringing the full picture into the relationship. You're bringing this filtered version of yourself, a more controlled version of you, a more careful version. And that version might create less conflict in the short term, but it also creates less connection. So when we talk about what needs to change, we're not going to start with her. We're starting with you being willing to show back up differently. That means being more direct about what you want, even if it feels risky and uncomfortable. It means saying things in a way that isn't loaded with resentment or frustration from the get-go, but also isn't watered down to the point where it doesn't really say anything. And that is a skill most men haven't learned. They either come in hot, way too strong, and it turns into conflict immediately, or they hold back so much that nothing actually gets addressed. But there's a middle ground here where you can be clear and grounded and honest without it turning into a fight or a shutdown, and that's where the shift starts. Not by forcing the relationship to change, but by changing how you show up inside of it. Because when you stop avoiding the reaction and you learn how to stay steady in it instead, well, everything begins moving differently. And that doesn't mean she changes overnight, but it does mean the pattern you've been stuck in doesn't keep running the same way. And that's the only place real change comes from. If you're listening to this and you can see yourself in it, even a little bit, not just the frustration, but the resentment, the pulling back, the avoiding, the way your life has slowly shifted around all of this, then this isn't something that is just going to work itself out magically. Because everything you've been doing makes sense. But it's also what's keeping this exact pattern you don't like in place. Working more doesn't fix it. Saying less doesn't fix it. Waiting for her to notice or respond differently doesn't fix it and likely won't happen. It just keeps the distance in place, even if things look fine on the surface. Here's the part that I really want you to take in. You don't need to keep living like this. You don't need to spend the next 10, 20, or 30 years in a relationship where you feel this disconnected, this guarded, this unsure of how to even bring up what matters to you. But something does have to change. And it's not about trying harder in the same ways you already have. It's about learning how to show up differently in a way that actually creates a different response. And that's the work I do with my clients. We take this exact pattern, the resentment, the withdrawal, the overworking, the avoiding, and we break it down so you can see it clearly. And then we rebuild how you show up in a way that creates connection instead of distance. You're not going to do this by guessing, and you won't do it by hoping, but by actually knowing what to say and how to say it and how to stay grounded when things don't immediately go the way you want them to. So if you're ready to stop managing around the problem and actually start changing what's happening in your relationship, I want to invite you to book a call with me. We'll talk about what's going on for you specifically, where you're stuck, and what it would look like to start shifting this in a real, practical way. Because again, it doesn't fix itself, but it can change. And it starts with you deciding that you don't want to keep doing it the same way. Take care. We'll see you next time. Thanks for being here. If something in this episode hit home, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more men find the support they need. And if you are ready to get help or take the next step, you'll find the link to book a free call in the show notes. I'll see you next time.